You're probably familiar with Indian Yellow, that legendary pigment made from cow urine, collected from cows fed exclusively on mango leaves until the cows died and everyone agreed maybe. Let's not do that anymore. It's one of those art history facts that sounds like a prank but isn't. So let me ask you something. If I told you there was a 19th century pigment allegedly made from snake excrement, would you assume that's nonsense? Marketing hype? Colonial exoticism? A colour man having a laugh? Because that's exactly what most people did. And that's where this story begins. In the mid-19th century, French colour men listed a pigment called jaune Peruvian, Peruvian Yellow. And if you read the descriptions closely, they don't say mineral, they don't say synthetic, they say something far more awkward. They imply an animal origin. Specifically, snake excrement, which immediately triggers the internal alarm system we all have. You know the one. That sounds fake. Oh, that sounds like Victorian nonsense. That sounds like something no one should ever repeat. So historians quietly did what historians often do. They nodded politely and moved on. Here's the problem. Art history is very good at beautiful stories. It's less good at embarrassing ones. Indian Yellow survives because it's already famous. It's safely ridiculous. It's been processed. Jaune Peruvian. Too weird, too specific, too unpublishable. So the pigment sat in catalogues, footnotes and trade lists, treated as a curiosity, if it was treated at all. No one proved it was real. No one proved it was fake. They just, didn't check, which is always where the trouble starts. So I did the boring thing. I didn't ask, does this story sound plausible? I asked, what is the pigment actually made of, using non-invasive XRF and in situ SERS, methods designed precisely for moments like this, where you don't get to scrape history with a scalpel. And the answer came back calmly, without drama, without mythology. Murixide, complexed with zinc, a real compound, a real colorant, chemically coherent, historically plausible, no unicorns, no Victorian hallucinations, just chemistry. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because murixide was known in the 19th century. It was produced from nitrogen-rich organic waste, and yes, snake excrement could plausibly be part of that supply chain. Can I prove that exact source? No. And here's the key point. No one can. Once murixide is extracted and purified, its biological origin disappears. Chemistry is rude like that. It doesn't preserve gossip. So what you're left with isn't proof of snake poo, but proof that the claim was not absurd. Which is much worse. This isn't a story about excrement. It's a story about assumptions. Jaune Peruvian wasn't rejected because it was false. It was ignored because it sounded stupid. And sounding stupid is often enough to exile something from serious consideration. No one wanted to be the person who said, actually, this might be real. Because that sentence ends badly at conferences. This is the same pattern you've seen before. If a pigment doesn't fit the narrative, it becomes exotic. If it's exotic, it becomes unimportant. If it's unimportant, no one analyses it properly. Absence becomes consensus. And consensus becomes history. Not because anyone lied, but because no one wanted to look foolish by taking a foolish-sounding claim seriously. Chemistry is brutally democratic. It doesn't care if a story is elegant. It doesn't care if a source is embarrassing. It doesn't care how much effort you've invested in ignoring it. It only answers one question. What's actually there? And in this case, what's there is a real pigment with a real chemical identity that was quietly written off because it didn't fit the tone of polite scholarship. So where does that leave us? With an uncomfortable conclusion. Jaune Peruvian wasn't myth. It wasn't marketing nonsense, and it wasn't disproven. It was simply unexamined. Not because the chemistry was hard, but because the story was awkward. And if that makes you uneasy, it should. Because if history can lose a pigment for sounding ridiculous, what else have we ignored? Because it didn't sound respectable enough to deserve measurement. The most dangerous thing in science isn't being wrong. It's being too embarrassed to check. And sometimes the only thing separating myth from fact is the willingness to analyze something that sounds stupid out loud. Fade out.